Continuing with the Elizabethan Poor Laws, overseers of the community facilitated care for those unable to care for themselves. Provisions of the Elizabethan Poor Law is when they started defining poor. So you had able-bodied poor who were able to work but were poor. You had the idle poor who were the vagrants and the beggars who they deemed able to work but they just didn't want to, and so they begged. You had the idle poor and you had impotent poor as well as children. The American Revolution. The American Revolution destroyed trade, and a war fought in the colonies wrought havoc on the lands. Poverty during this time period was very high. American Civil War. The war fought in the South of the Union to free men, women, and children from slavery. It was accomplished, releasing them from bondage, but the land was left barren of homes, crops, and livestock as the toll of war destroyed everything in the South. Continued discrimination of Black Americans left the land in deep, deep poverty, especially for them. They were released and there was no provisions made for their care. The animosity between the two different groups of people, it was horrendous. Post-Civil War at all levels was where the government tried on all levels to control prices and provide supplies, but they couldn't relieve the suffering. They could not fight inflation, and the extortion was horrible. Social work's quest to be a profession. During this time period, upperclassmen and women, through secular as well as church-based programs, sought to serve the poor. Settlement houses were begun. This is when Jane Addams, the mother of social work, along with Julia Lathrop, began serving the poor, conducting research, fighting legislation to help, and creating reform. The Great Depression. The Great Depression led the way for government to take the main role in the relief for Americans who were suffering. Charitable organizations had no way of dealing with the extreme poverty and needs of the people. This was also when the New Deal was created. The end of World War II. This led to the establishment of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Focus moved from the low-income families to the white middle class and upper class. This was a time when people were very unhappy with government. War on poverty. This is when President Johnson declared war on poverty. Programs such as Head Start, Job Corps, Neighborhood Youth Corps, Medicare, Medicaid were all created to help the community with great success. From the war on poverty to the war on welfare, these were the years that Nixon, Clinton, and Reagan were in office. Programs were reduced and frozen. Policies that sought to help the poor were eliminated, creating soaring rates of poverty. The Clinton years. Clinton, during his time in office, was able to allow the dissolving of some government control of social services. He was able to give back to charitable groups, both faith-based and secular organizations, to help the poor. During Obama's term, the Recovery Act was begun. This increased food assistance for families, increased the size and duration of unemployment. It provided a temporary increase in the family tax credit, and also increased temporarily the earned income tax credit. And it began with a 4-year term that Clinton has served in. We've not seen that many policies, but regulations on different organizations have decreased, which has allowed a decrease in the prices that entities are required to pay, which lowers the prices for food, electricity, and things that have shown marginal improvement, or a steady, maybe not improvement, but there's not been a rise in poverty up until the coronavirus, and we will see how that affects us in the years to come. This next slide, it shows some of the laws and policies and the dates that they were enacted. We've talked about these, and you're welcome to gain more information if you would like on them on your own time. Common programs that we have discussed are TANF, which is Temporary Assistance for Non-Working Families, food stamps, now known as SNAP, are vouchers for food, Earned Income Tax Credit, Medicaid, Affordable Health Care Act, subsidized housing, WIC, which is free or reduced price lunches, minimum wages, unemployment insurance, and Social Security. To find some of these as well as other programs, your resources are Fiscal Tiger, which is a website that consolidates many resources into one web page that gives descriptions of what you're looking for. It's a great resource. Social Work Policy Institute has a multitude of information about programs and policies that help with your care of the poor. And a great one also is the University of Wisconsin-Madison Institute for Research on Poverty. This is where I found the podcast on social poverty. It has lots and lots of research, programs, and information to share for those who are working with people in poverty. We have a long way to go to eradicate, if we ever do that, poverty. But this does show the impact that some of our government programs have had with reducing or assisting those who are in poverty. It's nowhere good enough yet, but it does show you that we have made progress. So, why is family poverty relevant to social work? Ultimately, it affects our children. Negative influence on brain activity and development are found in children who live in poverty. Around the age of 2, brain scans show that children in poverty and children who are not in poverty have the same size brain up until 2 years old. At 2 years old, the rate of brain growth slows down in children who live in poverty. This is due to stress from the environment, violence, poor interaction between parents and children. They're not being read to as much. Parents are so stressed out that, that the kids, they come second. Their main focus is on keeping the kids alive and not the other luxuries that people that are raising children who aren't in a life or death situation when it comes to providing shelter and food and clothing for their children. Neighborhoods that are higher in poverty, the violence is greater, the schools are lower quality, there's environmental toxins, unstable family life again because of all the stressors. People in poverty are also linked to greater outcomes of negative health. There's higher rates of substance abuse, of addiction, incarceration, crime, and many people see poverty as an ACE, an adverse childhood experience, and if they don't see it as an adverse childhood experience, then it's correlated with adverse childhood experiences. We spend $500 billion a year due to increased health and criminal justice expenditures based on the side effects or the detriments that our families in poverty face. Micro-level interventions for families in poverty, the number one thing is assessment and building an empathetic relationship, not seeing the family as lazy or they just don't care or they're dirty. It's building a quality relationship and reflecting to them how precious they are. And through that process, you provide resources. Again, having a book of resources that are specific to your community and to your city. Having the resources that I showed you in Screen 22, where Social Work Policy Institute, Wisconsin-Madison University, having that on hand to be able to refer people to or to find out what you need to provide for them, connecting them with these agencies. People get overwhelmed, they don't know where to begin, and if you come in with a calm demeanor and let them know that you're going to walk with them through this, and we're going to make calm out of the chaos that they feel that they're in, step by step, is going a long way in a micro level intervention. Financial counseling. We have had families in the internship that I had with a foster agency who had no idea how to budget, and I had to provide financial counseling. They were so proud to show me all these things that they had signed up for. A monthly program to get flavored water tablets in the mail that they could add to their water, and all these little goodies they were getting each month, and how well they had done in choosing which ones they got that were so inexpensive, but then they weren't able to pay their rent. So financial counseling is an important micro-level intervention. Navigating paperwork. Some of these families have not completed high school, and they might be confused by the amount of paperwork and what exactly people are asking for. So lending a helping hand and explaining and doing the paperwork for some of the programs that they need to apply for. Teaching regulation skills. These families, a lot of times, are caught in the fight, flight, or freeze. They're trying to survive, and they live in neighborhoods that are more violent. They don't feel safe. Many of these families have higher incidents of domestic violence, and so they are living on edge, and being able not only to plug them into the resources that they need to deal with mental health problems, substance abuse problems, domestic violence problems, being able to teach them to recognize signals in their body that are, all I know to say is triggering them, and how to intercede and calm their bodies down and teach their children how to do this is also important on a micro level. Meso level interventions, advocating for the family. Again, these families have so much going on. I had one family in my internship that it was grandparents who were not in the best of health by any means, and they had taken in their grandchildren. I had a lot of families who had taken in grandchildren, and physically they weren't able to take care of the kids because of their health concerns. The parents of the children had left the house in such a bad situation that it was infested with mice. The downstairs, where the children lived, you couldn't even walk in it without fear of getting stuck by a needle from the drug use that was going on. And so having me come in and make a plan and initiate cleaning up of the premises and getting things in order. And as their surroundings gained more order, their brain gained more order. And so being able to go to the community and saying, hey, we need a crew to come in and do this, and we need a crew to come in and that. So being able to advocate on their part and get things into a manageable situation where they can take over. Doing workshops in the community, teaching, like we said in the beginning, or on the micro level intervention is, goodness, I'm almost up on my time. But teaching financial workshops, creating new food banks. Some food banks are only accessible because you have a vehicle, so more local food banks is necessary. Creating co-ops within the neighborhood where people can help each other out. Awareness campaigns where you are teaching the local community businesses of what they can do to play a part. And that goes in with community education. Also creating opportunities for people to collaborate, for different businesses to come together and see how they